Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth.
Major, 3 weeks out from the election, what does it say that the vice president is having to work so hard to court black men who should be solidly in the Democratic camp?
A couple of ways to look at that, John, at least two, maybe three. One is the black vote is no longer monolithic in this country, and that's a good thing. It's an evolving political dynamic in which black male voters look at parties differently than they might have taking cues from their grandfathers or fathers. That would be the evolutionary things are going well part of the equation. The other way to look at it is there is still an invisible bar that a woman seeking the presidency of the United States cannot cross because she doesn't know how high it is, and that there is embedded sexism that can always work to the net detriment of any woman seeking the highest office in the land, and this is just the latest, most visible representation of it.
As we get closer to forcing the issue of tangibles to become a reality, that's why you're going to be seeing a lot of people from the dominant society and these white-adjacent groups nutting up and going crazy. They're going to be lighting into us, attacking what we stand for. White supremacy has created a racial pyramid and artificially placed us at the bottom of it. But even so, this phony racial order has real consequences for us that we suffer. But everyone who is not black, and a handful of sellouts who are, they're beholden to this racialist pyramid scheme because it's given them every crumb of their daily bread. So they will lie, they will steal, attack people, and for the white supremacists even kill to preserve it. Look at what this CBS reporter did. When talking about black people, these guys couldn't help but shoehorn their phony narrative into it. They just flat out lied. And what they said is the exact opposite of the reality. Why are black voters trending away from the Democrats? Now, the obvious answer is because the Democrats aren't doing what black voters want. That's the common sense obvious answer. But did this guy say that? Of course not. He totally ignores that, and instead he begins a phony rant saying that it's because things are good for the black community, historically speaking. He keeps using the word evolution. This society has not evolved, and our position in it has not evolved either. Now, as we all know, the reason black voters are gravitating away from the Democrats is precisely because things are not good. That's the most obvious reason for why any voting bloc breaks away from whatever party they traditionally supported, because clearly that party is not supporting them. Wouldn't that be the obvious answer? Now, why wouldn't he say that? Why wouldn't he talk to the black men that they're talking about? Instead of talking to them, they decide, no, we're going to go ahead and we're going to say what it is that they're thinking, because they're terrified of speaking the truth. These white media talking heads, they don't talk to black voters. They never do. Notice that? And we told you this is what would happen as black people's influence and clout began to rise. We would force the scumbags into their network studios. And even then, as we saw with Nina Turner, with the admittedly imperfect advocacy that she gave, they're not even safe from the truth in their own network studios. So no matter where they go, if they're talking to black people at all, enough pressure has been coming from the black grassroots where they're going to have to be hearing this regardless. So they've decided, well, hell, we're just not going to talk to black people at all. We can't be talking to black people. Too many of them will say the wrong thing, even the ones who we had on the payroll. Because of the pressure coming from the black grassroots, Barack Obama's had to get out here and tear us behind, and they don't dare defend that. They can't. We're putting the bastards' backs to the wall. White power is so fragile, they can't even allow the most powerless people in the society to be able to speak because they don't want anyone to spoil their narrative. White supremacy built a house of cards, but like any house of cards, all it would take is just a small breeze to knock it over, so they have to hyper-protect it. They know the real reason that this is all happening, because of the social pressure taking place from the black media. But they can't say that. None of them can. What we've done is to successfully resurrect and reassert a true type of black-centered politics, one that only makes demands that require power to change hands. The white media can't discuss that. It's too dangerous. In fact, it's so dangerous, they can't even attack us directly. As I've told you, the difference between an extreme and mainstream position is how often people talk about it. When something is never talked about, when people go out of their way to avoid mentioning it, everyone understands that it's because this is a bad thing. There has to be something wrong with it. It's got to be wrong, otherwise it would be discussed openly and frequently. That's how established power works. They get to decide what's heard the most and what's not. This is a mind trick that white power plays. Treat black people in our interest like a dirty word, something that you don't discuss in polite company. In fact, you don't discuss it at all. And then people get the idea, yeah, when it comes to black people, we're not supposed to be talking about that. Why are you niggers even talking about your issues? That's not important. Shouldn't be talking about that at all. You should be talking about everybody else except for you. So for the last 15 years, we've been promoting this project of forcing the word black back into the political discourse. And what a surprise. In very short order, black has gone from being a dirty word to a household word. The job of the white media, though, is not to entertain you. The purpose of the white media is mind control. That's the business they're actually in. This, for them, is about using lies and obfuscations to cover up the truth and to get you to go along with whatever phony narrative is expedient to the interest of white power. So rather than discuss and tell the viewers how black people's wealth hasn't changed since the Civil War and how every single issue black people protested about in the 60s is still around today, every problem from unequal education to unequal housing to engineering black poverty to over-policing and mass incarceration to redlining. Whatever historical issue you want to name that exemplified the black struggle in the 20th century, it's still around today. That's what the entirety of any segment talking about black voters, male or female, should be about. It should be about how black America has been held down and deliberately singled out to be economically strangled. But the white media's job is to conceal all that. Or to go ahead and say, well, things are good now. It's their job to lie. But as far as they're concerned, a horrifying precedent's now being set, in that even if Kamala Harris's plan for black men is clearly just a bunch of empty talk, the problem is you have one political party that is publicly saying something that they haven't said in decades, and that is that they're offering policies specifically for black people. Sure, all they're doing is just saying it, they're not actually doing it. It's weasel words. But for them, the problem is that it's even happening at all. That sets the bad precedent. They've lost control of the narrative. And if they've lost control of the narrative, that also means the distinct possibility now exists for them to lose control of the outcome as well. That's what's truly at stake here. You have to be able to control what people think about the issues. That's something Dr. John Henrik Clarke talked about, how the white media is out to control image. If they can control what you see, they can control how you see yourself and the world. And if somebody can control how you see yourself, they can control what you do about yourself. And of course, what's true for the individual is also true for the group. If you can control what people see, you can also control how they see the world. And if you can control how they see the world, you can control what they do in the world. That's what the white media is out to control. As far as they're concerned, this horrifying precedent has to be rolled back somehow. And you start by claiming that it's not happening for the reasons you might think it is. Oh, you might think that black voters are actually angry with the Democrats, that they're disgruntled with them. No. What's happening is things are good now. Why they're so good for black people, they've decided that they can go ahead and vote however. No, that's not the way it works. The black vote happens to be a minority, and that being the case, it only has impact as long as that vote is aggregated. That's the reason why this is happening. That's the reason why black people vote as a block. Because that's the only way that a minority of voters can actually swing an election. They got to work together. But that's what you got the white media trying to do, trying to derange our internal politics by saying, oh, well, black people, things are actually good for you. No, they're not. We know the truth. The white media is not going to be brainwashing anybody. No Jedi mind tricks going on here. And by the way, just for the record, you got the racists on the white right who are predictably losing their minds simply because Kamala Harris was making an empty proposal to give 1 million loans to black businesses. And they claim, well, that's discriminatory. Well, they totally didn't even read because they're illiterate. They didn't read the part where it said black entrepreneurs and others. It's part of the reason why in yesterday's briefing, I underlined the words and others in red, a thick red line so that you wouldn't miss it. This is yet another example of why we shouldn't vote Republican either. These racists have no problem with targeting black people to be discriminated against in every way under the sun. They don't even want you to point out that it's happening. But when the issue of repairing the deliberate racially based deprivation they've inflicted on us comes up, then they say, well, that's discriminatory. Yeah, harming black people, depriving us of opportunities, killing black people, that's not discriminatory. But saying what we're going to do to fix it, well, that is. They never say that the Homestead Act was discriminatory. When white GIs came home from both world wars and were given all kinds of government freebies and benefits, damn near free housing loans, business loans, GI bills to pay for their college educations, the white middle class was invented out of whole cloth on the U.S. government's dime. But it only applied to white people, and black folks were the ones whose taxes went to pay for it. And the same thing goes for your suburbs, paid for with black people's taxes. Your chronic whiners on the white right never say that any of that was discriminatory. When a group of people have been targeted for discrimination over the course of centuries, unless you have a targeted policy to benefit those exact same people to the exact extent that they were deprived, then in reality you're just a racist who's trying to perpetuate the inequality. Kamala Harris is not trying to help black people any more than the white right. She's trying to push a phony PR stunt pretending to be addressing our interests. That's the point here. So she can say, oh, look, I put the word empower into my little buzzwords on my website. See, I put the word empower there. This is somebody trying to co-opt the language and the verbiage of the black media, but it won't work. Even her clearly empty proposals are too much for the recipients and the dependents of white privilege on the right and the left to tolerate, because they're furious that either party has come to the point now that they're saying black at all. They've been fighting a war for the last 3 generations to keep this from happening. Oh yeah, let's just go ahead and go through the motions of talking about a black agenda, but the fact that that's even happening at all is too much for them. They can't afford for any bricks to be taken away from that wall. For them, these phony token gestures from Kamala Harris are simply too much because they set a bad precedent. Now imagine how much more furious they're going to be when the dam begins to give way on cash reparations. You think that these guys are showing their lunacy now, you just wait for that. A lot of people have been eating good for hundreds of years off of our deprivation. It's been a dirty business, but also a very lucrative one for them as well. But this racial con only works as long as we can't put pressure on the system, and for the longest time we didn't. Not necessarily because white power had disempowered us, but because we had reined ourselves in. That's the best trick the white supremacy ever pulled off. To get the slaves to go ahead and stay their own hand, the black hand, that can crush white supremacy, to get us to go ahead and say, well, we can't do that. Well, finally, there's at least 2 going on 3 generations now who don't give a damn whether or not anybody likes what it is that we're doing. Power is not about popularity. Power is about getting what you need. As I've always told you, if you want to be liked, or rather if you want for people to tolerate your presence, just go ahead and say yes to everything. People will use you for a doormat and you'll be sitting there smiling and going yes. But on the other hand, if you want to be respected, then you better start learning to say no. The goal for Kamala Harris is to try to falsely claim that she's offering black people something. But we're not fooled. Nothing she's offering is what we've been demanding. And that's how this actually works. This is not about her coming up to us and saying, well, here's what I'm offering. That ain't how it works. We tell her this is what we demand. And if she's not sitting there going, okay, here it is, then that's not someone offering you anything. You have the clowns over on Fox News talking about, well, what about reparations? Notice that she's saying that there should be a study for reparations. Why won't she say if she supports it or not? That's what happens when you have your brain on stupid. Kamala Harris has already said what she thinks about reparations. She said no. But of course, the white right are always the last ones to figure out common sense. But we can't be slow like them. Both the white left and the white right fear, and they hate black empowerment. They can't even stand when it's just mere gestures. But when you cross the line into talking about money, that threatens all of them. And that being the case, let's make sure we keep our foot up their behinds. This is about making sure that black stays front and center in the American political discourse where it belongs. And it's also about making sure that we define what our interests are, just like with cash reparations out in California. So nobody in the government or the white media is going to be telling us what our interests are or why we're doing things. We're going to be speaking for ourselves. And when we do, they can glare at us through their beady little eyes. They can grind and gnash their crooked little teeth. But that's not going to bother us at all. And for the recipients of racial privilege in this country, that will be news. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Frederick Richburg, Dean Ballantyne, Kenneth Steele, Zell1, and Sakina Collins. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.